There is a very specific kind of silence that happens when a Gen X man walks into a corporate boardroom in his late 40s or early 50s. It is not the silence of fear. It is not the frozen quiet of a room waiting for a tyrant to yell. It is something much more subtle and much more unsettling to the people around him. He takes his seat. He doesn't rush to fill the air with small talk about his weekend or perform an elaborate display of corporate enthusiasm. He listens. He watches. When someone asks an anxious question about a failing quarter, he doesn't panic and he doesn't offer a breathless, over-engineered solution. He just looks at the data, gives a short, measured assessment, and stops talking. And to the ambitious managers, the anxious directors, and the younger executives rushing up the ladder, that exact behavior is deeply, quietly terrifying. If you are a Gen X man in the corporate world, you have probably noticed this. You've seen people hesitate before speaking to you. You've heard colleagues describe you as unreadable, intimidating, or hard to read, and you might genuinely wonder what you did wrong. After all, you're not yelling, you're not playing office politics, you're just doing your job and going home. So why does your mere presence make people feel like they're standing on thin ice? What people don't realize, and what modern corporate psychology is only just beginning to map out, is that you aren't intimidating because of what you are doing. You are intimidating because of what you have stopped doing. And that distinction changes everything. To understand why your presence causes friction, we have to look at the game everyone else is still playing. Modern corporate culture runs on a very specific fuel: anxiety disguised as ambition. Think about the standard environment. Everyone is performing. People are constantly managing impressions, laughing too loudly at senior leadership's jokes, sending frantic emails at 11 p.m. just so everyone knows they're putting the grind, and turning every minor project into an existential crusade. It's a high-stakes theater of desperation. When you were in your 20s and 30s, you probably played that game too. You had to. You were building your career, proving your worth, and learning the ropes. You stressed over performance reviews, worried about office politics, and lost sleep over whether the VP liked your presentation. But somewhere along the way, usually in your 40s, something shifted. Maybe you survived a couple of corporate restructurings where good people were laid off for no reason. Maybe you watched a corporate savior come in, make grand promises, and leave a trail of chaos behind. Maybe you had a health scare or a family crisis, or simply looked up one day and realized that the mountain you were climbing didn't actually have a prize at the top. You realized that corporate theater is mostly noise. And once you see the strings on the puppet, you can't unsee them. You stop participating in the frantic dance. When someone brings a manufactured crisis into a meeting, you don't match their panic. When someone tries to pull you into office gossip or political maneuvering, you politely decline or change the subject. That detachment is what psychologists call an emotional boundary. But to people trapped inside the corporate matrix, your boundary looks like a brick wall. They expect you to sweat the details the way they do. Why does an older man's calm indifference feel like a direct threat to people who rely on constant emotional validation? To close that gap, we have to examine what happens when an organization meets a man who cannot be emotionally manipulated. In corporate psychology, control is often maintained through subtle emotional triggers: manufactured urgency, guilt, passive-aggressive emails, and the fear of exclusion. Younger professionals and insecure managers use these tools constantly, sometimes without even knowing they're doing it, to test boundaries and assert dominance. When they try those tactics on a Gen X man who has spent 25 years navigating corporate meltdowns, market crashes, and bad bosses, those tactics simply bounce off. Imagine this scenario. A mid-level director rushes into your office, visibly stressed, and says, "We have a massive problem with the client deliverable. Everything is falling apart. What are we going to do?" 10 years ago, you might have taken the bait. Your heart rate would have spiked, you would have jumped up, started barking orders, and joined the collective panic. Today, you lean back, you take a breath, you look at them and say calmly, "Okay, let's look at what's actually broken and let's fix it tomorrow morning. It's not an emergency." To you, that response is rational, grounded leadership. It's emotional regulation. To the panic director, that response is profoundly disorienting. They came into your office looking to share their anxiety, distribute the burden, and watch you react. Instead, they hit a wall of absolute stillness. Your lack of panic forces them to look at their own panic, and people hate nothing more than being forced to look at their own emotional fragility. By refusing to catch the hot potato of their anxiety, you make them feel exposed. They feel small not because you belittled them, but because your composure highlighted how out of control they actually are. This brings us to a second, deeper question that lingers in the minds of the people you work with. If you aren't motivated by fear, status, or approval anymore, what is actually driving you? And how do you negotiate with someone who doesn't want anything they are offering? Let's answer that, because this is where the real psychological shift occurs and where the intimidation factor spikes into overdrive. When a man realizes that his self-worth is no longer tied to his corporate title, his power profile changes completely. Think about the traditional levers of corporate power. Why do people work 80 hours a week? For the promotion, the corner office, the bonus, the stock options, and the title on LinkedIn. They want the approval of the hierarchy. As a Gen X corporate veteran, you've likely reached a point where you realize that a bigger title usually just comes with a bigger target on your back and more meetings that could have been emails. You have financial stability, or at least a realistic understanding of what you actually need to live. You've downsized your ego. You don't need the validation of a 20-something HR consultant or a frantic C-suite executive who changes their vision every 6 months. And when a man stops needing the system, he becomes immune to its threats. If a senior VP implies that your position might be vulnerable if you don't toe the line, a younger employee will sweat bullets. You mentally calculate your savings, think about the consulting work you could do, or the simpler life you've always wanted, and you realize, I could walk away tomorrow. That realization changes the cadence of your voice. It changes the way you look people in the eye. When you sit in a negotiation or a performance review, you aren't desperate. Desperation has a distinct scent. It smells like over-explaining, nervous laughter, and immediate compliance. Freedom has a different scent entirely. It smells like silence. When you say no in a meeting, you don't wrap it in 5 paragraphs of apologies and excuses. You just say, no, that doesn't work for us, and you stop talking. You let the silence stretch. In corporate culture, silence is a vacuum, and inexperienced people rush to fill it. They start negotiating against themselves. They start making concessions, but you just sit there, perfectly comfortable in the quiet. That is what people call intimidating. They call it cold, arrogant, or unapproachable. But let's be entirely honest with ourselves. It isn't arrogance. Arrogance is a mask worn by insecure men who need everyone to know how smart they are. What you have is something entirely different. It's self-containment. If your quiet confidence is just self-protection and peace, how do you stop letting it alienate the people you actually want to mentor and support? This is the crucial pivot point for any Gen X man navigating the second half of his career. You didn't spend decades surviving corporate life just to become an intimidating enigma that young talent is afraid to approach. You've accumulated a massive reservoir of wisdom, technical competence, and crisis management skill. That knowledge is valuable, but if people are too intimidated to bring you real problems, that wisdom stays locked inside your head. How do you take that hard-earned boundary setting and turn it from a wall into a bridge? It starts with intentional warmth. Because your default state is now unbothered and calm, you have to actively signal safety to the people who genuinely want to learn from you. When a younger engineer, analyst, or manager comes to you with a messy problem, your natural inclination might be to give a blunt 2-sentence reality check. And while that's accurate, to a younger professional who hasn't built your thick skin, it can feel like a reprimand. True power, the kind of mature authority we talk about here at Wiser You, doesn't need to crush people to prove its point. It uplifts by proxy. When you pair your boundaries with curiosity, the dynamic shifts. Instead of just saying, "No, that won't work," you ask, "Walk me through how you arrived at this conclusion." Suddenly, you aren't the intimidating monolith across the desk. You are a sounding board. You are using that hard-won patience to let them find the flaw in their own logic, rather than handing them the answer like a schoolmaster. And when you do that, the fear evaporates, replaced by a deep, abiding respect. They realize that the quiet man in the corner isn't judging them. He's the only person in the building who has the patience to watch them grow without panicking. By the time you reach this stage of your corporate life, you have earned every single ounce of peace you possess. If people find you intimidating because you refuse to play petty office politics, because you don't panic during a crisis, or because you can sit in a room full of noise and say absolutely nothing, let them. That intimidation isn't a flaw in your character. It is the natural shadow cast by a man who has stopped performing and started living. It is the byproduct of emotional maturity in a world addicted to superficial urgency. You don't need to apologize for your quietness. You don't need to soften your boundaries to make anxious people comfortable in their chaos. Your job now isn't to run yourself ragged trying to win the approval of a system that chews people up and spits them out. Your job is to stand steady, to do good work, to protect your peace, and to let your calm authority speak for itself. You spent decades learning how to survive the corporate game. Now you've mastered something much better. You've learned how to step outside of it while still holding the room in the palm of your hand. That isn't dangerous, it's just freedom, and it's the most powerful place a man can be. If this resonated with where you are in your journey, and you want to keep exploring the psychology of mature power and personal autonomy without the noise, take a quiet second to hit that like button and subscribe to Wiser You. Thank you for watching. Stay steady, and we'll see you in the next video.